Hello, dear squirrels. You know, my dogs are killing me if I'm sitting in here, so. And this chapter was very short. If I would have not very short, but I didn't have a whole lot more to read, so it's going to be short today. And then that is the end of this book. What? So, I found that out yesterday. Look at all that mess. I scrounged around to find another book to read, and there's 2 more Louisa May Alcott books that wrote Little Women. We've got 8 Cousins. So 8 Cousins is what we'll read next. And then it's something like Miss Rose something or other. I think she may be a character in the 8 Cousins. But anyway, so we'll start 8 Cousins tomorrow. But let's finish the last chapter of Good Wives. Yes, Jo was a very happy woman there in spite of hard work, much anxiety, and a perpetual racket. And I've decided that we didn't read this book. I'm pretty sure we didn't. She enjoyed it heartily and found the applause of her boys more satisfying than any praise of the world. For now she told no stories except to her flock of enthusiastic believers and admirers. As the years went on, 2 little lads of her own came to increase her happiness. Rob, named for Grandpa, and Teddy, a happy-go-lucky baby, who seemed to have inherited his papa's sunshiny temper as well as his mother's lively spirit. How they ever grew up alive in that whirlpool of boys was a mystery to their grandma and aunts. But they flourished like dandelions in spring, and their rough nurses loved and served them well. There were a great many holidays at Plumfield, and one of the most delightful was the yearly apple picking. For then the Marches, Lawrences, Brooks, and Bears turned out in full force and made a day of it. 5 years after Jo's wedding, one of those fruitful festivals occurred. A mellow October day when the air was full of an exhilarating freshness which made the spirits rise and the blood dance healthily in the veins. The old orchard wore its holiday attire. Goldenrod and asters fringed the mossy walls. Grasshoppers skipped briskly in the sere grass, and crickets chirped like fairy pipers at a feast. Squirrels were busy with their small harvesting. Birds twittered their adieu from the alders in the lane, and every tree stood ready to send down its shower of red or yellow apples at the first shake. Everybody was there. Everybody laughed and sang, climbed up and tumbled down. Everybody declared that there never had been such a perfect day or such a jolly set to enjoy it. And everyone gave themselves up to the simple pleasures of the hour as freely as if there were no such things as care or sorrow in the world. Mr. March strolled placidly about, quoting Tusser, Cowley, and Columella to Mr. Lawrence while enjoying the gentle apple's winey juice. The professor charged up and down the green aisles like a stout Teutonic knight, with a pole for a lance, leading on the boys who made a hook and ladder company of themselves, and performed wonders in the way of ground and lofty tumbling. Laurie devoted himself to the little ones, rode his small daughter in a bushel basket, took Daisy up among the birds' nests, and kept adventurous Rob from breaking his neck. Mrs. March and Meg sat among the apple piles like a pair of pomonas, sorting the contributions that kept pouring in, while Amy, with a beautiful motherly expression in her face, sketched the various groups and watched over one pale lad who sat adoring her with his little crutch beside him. Jo was in her element that day and rushed about excuse me, with her gown pinned up and her hat anywhere but on her head, and her baby tucked under her arm, ready for any lively adventure which might turn up. Little Teddy bore a charmed life, for nothing ever happened to him, and Joe never felt any anxiety when he was whisked up into a tree by one lad, galloped off on the back of another, or supplied with sour russets by his indulgent papa, who labored under the Germanic delusion that babies could digest anything from pickled cabbage to buttons, nails, and their own small shoes. She knew that little Teddy would turn up again in time, safe and rosy, dirty and serene, and she always received him back with a hearty welcome, for Joe loved her babies tenderly. At 4 o'clock a lull took place, and baskets remained empty while the apple pickers rested and compared rents and bruises. Then Joe and Meg, with a detachment of the bigger boys, set forth the supper on the grass. For an out-of-door tea was always the crowning joy of the day. God, I need something to drink. I have my feet up and yarn stuff all over me. Flack. This is Nordica. And a whole flipping bag. Let's see, where am I? Rents and bruises. Then Joe and Meg, with a detachment of the bigger boys, set forth the supper on the grass, for an out-of-door tea was always the crowning joy of the day. The land literally flowed with milk and honey on such occasions, for the lads were not required to sit at table, but allowed to partake of refreshments as they liked, freedom being the sauce best beloved by the boyish soul. They availed themselves of the rare privilege to the fullest extent, for some tried the pleasing experiment of drinking milk while standing on their heads. Others lent a charm to leapfrog by eating pie in the pauses of the game. Cookies were sown broadcast over the fields. Cookies were sown? S-O-W-N. And apple turnovers roosted in the trees like a new style of bird. The little girls had a private tea party, and Ted roved among the edibles at his own sweet will. When no one could eat any more, the professor proposed the first regular toast, which was always drunk at such times. Auntie March, God bless her, a toast hardly given by the good man, who never forgot how much he owed her, and quietly drunk by the boys, who had been taught to keep their memory green. Now, Grandma's 60th birthday, long life to her, with 3 times 3. That was given with a will, as you may well believe, and the cheering once begun, it was hard to stop it. Everyone's health was proposed from the Lawrence, who was considered Mr. Lawrence, who was considered their special patron, to the astonished guinea pig, who had strayed from its proper sphere in search of its young master. Demi, as the oldest grandchild, then presented the queen of the day with various gifts so numerous that they were transported to the festive scene in a wheelbarrow. Funny presents, some of them, but what would have been defects to other eyes were ornaments to grandma's eyes, for the children's gifts were all their own. Every stitch Daisy's patient little fingers had put into the handkerchiefs she hemmed was better than embroidery to Mrs. March. Demi's miracle of mechanical skill though the cover wouldn't shut. Rob's footstool had a wiggle in its uneven legs that she declared was soothing, and no page of the costly book Amy's child gave her was so fair as that on which appeared in tipsy capitals the words, "To dear Grandma from her little Beth." During the ceremony, the boys had mysteriously disappeared, and when Mrs. March had tried to thank her children and broken down while Teddy wiped his eyes on his pinafore, the professor suddenly began to sing. Then from above him, voice after voice took up the words, and from tree to tree, doggone it, lost my place. Hang on. Come on. From tree to tree, where am I? Stop doing that. Oh my gosh. Suddenly began to sing. To dear Grandma from her little. During the ceremony, the boys had mysteriously disappeared, and when Mrs. March had tried to thank her children and broken down while Teddy wiped her eyes on his pinafore, the professor suddenly began to sing. Okay, now see. Then from above, voice after voice took up the words, and from tree to tree echoed the music of the unseen choir as the boys sang with all their hearts the little song that Joe had written. Laurie set to music, and the professor trained his lads to give with the best effect. This was something altogether new and improved, a grand success, for Mrs. March couldn't get over her surprise and insisted on shaking hands with every one of the featherless birds, from tall Franz and Emil to the little quadroon who had the sweetest voice of all. After the boys dispersed for a final lark, leaving Mrs. March and her daughters under the festival tree, I don't think I ever ought to call myself unlucky, Joe, again, when my greatest wish has been so beautifully gratified, said Mrs. Bear, taking Teddy's little fist out of the milk pitcher in which he was rapturously churning. And yet your life is very different from the one you pictured so long ago. Do you remember our castles in the air? Asked Amy, smiling as she watched Laurie and John playing cricket with the boys. Dear fellows, it does my heart good to see them forget business and frolic for a day, answered Joe, who now spoke in a maternal way of all mankind. Yes, I remember, but the life I wanted then seems selfish, lonely, and cold to me now. I haven't given up hope that I may write a good book yet, but I can wait, and I'm sure it will be all the better for such experiences and illusions as these. And Joe pointed from the lively lads in the distance to her father, leaning on the professor's arm as they walked to and fro in the sunshine, deep in one of the conversations which both enjoyed so much. Then to her mother, sitting enthroned among her daughters with their children in her lap and at her feet, as if all found help and happiness in the face which never could grow old to them. My castle was most nearly realized of all, was the most. I asked for splendid things, to be sure, but But in my heart I knew I should be satisfied. If I had a little home and John and some dear children like these, I've got them all, thank God, and I'm the happiest woman in the world. And Meg laid her hand on her tall tall boy's head with a face full of tender and devout content. My castle's very different from what I planned, but I would not alter it, though like Joe I don't relinquish all my artistic hopes or confine myself to helping others fulfill their dreams of beauty. I've begun to model a figure of my baby, and Laurie says it's the best thing I've ever done. I think so myself. Then, wait a minute. I've done so, I think to myself, and mean to do it in marble so that whatever happens, I may at least keep the image of my little angel. As Amy spoke, a great tear dropped on the golden hair of the sleeping child in her arms, for one well-beloved daughter was a frail little creature, and the dread of losing her was the shadow over Amy's sunshine. This cross was doing much for both father and mother. For one love and sorrow bound them closely together. Amy's nature was growing sweeter, deeper, and more tender. Laurie was growing more serious, strong, and firm, and both were learning that beauty, youth, good fortune, even love itself cannot keep care and pain, loss and sorrow from the most blessed. For into each life some rain must fall, some days must be dark and sad and dreary. She is growing better, I'm sure of it, my dear. Don't despond, but hope and keep happy, said Mrs. March, as tender-hearted Daisy stooped from her knees to lay her rosy cheek against her little cousin's pale one. I never ought to, while I have you to cheer me up, Marie, and Mary to take more than half of every burden, replied Amy warmly. He never lets me see his anxiety, but he is so sweet and patient with me, so devoted to Beth, and such a stay and compact to give me to me always. Stay comfort to me, and I can't love us to me always, that I can't love him enough. So in spite of one cross, I can say with Meg, thank God I'm a happy woman. There's no need for me to say it when everyone can see that I'm far happier than I deserve, added Joe, glancing from her good husband to her chubby children. And it's tumbling on the grass beside her. Fritz is getting gray and stout, and I'm growing as thin as a shadow, and I'm 30. We never shall be rich, and Plumfield may burn up any night, for that incorrigible Tommy Bangs will smoke from sweet firm cigars under the bedclothes, though he sets himself afire 3 times already. But in spite of these unromantic facts, I have nothing to complain of, and never was so jolly in my life. Excuse the remark, but living among boys, I can't help using their expressions now and then. Yes, Joe, I think your harvest will be a good one, began Mrs. March, frightening away the big cricket that... Let's see... Where was I? Can't help using the expression. Yes, Joe, I think your harvest will be a good one, began Mrs. March, frightening away a big cricket that was staring Teddy out of countenance. Not half so good as yours, Mother. Here it is, and we never can thank you enough for the patient sowing and reaping you've done, cried Joe with a loving impetuosity which she never would outgrow. I hope there will be more wheat and fewer tares every year, said Amy softly. A large sheaf but I know there's room in your large heart for it. Marmy dear, added Meg's tender voice. Touched to the heart, Mrs. March could only stretch out her arms as if to gather children and grandchildren to herself, and say, with face and voice full of motherly love, gratitude, and humility, "Oh, my girls, however long you may live, I never can wish you a greater happiness than this." That's it. It's longer than I thought. Alright, so, and then it goes into Little Men. And then I think Joe's Boys after that, but I think we just missed it. Or I did. So I hope you enjoyed Good Wives, and tomorrow we'll start 8 Cousins. Love y'all, and we'll be live tomorrow also, live at 5 Eastern. Love ya. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Bye-bye.